Hello and welcome along to another episode of the Tackling Sport podcast. We're back. It's Monday night. It's Daniel Hussey here, your host, joined alongside me by my brother Sean. Sean, how's it going?
All good.
We had a bit of a break for M&F, which we'll come to later on, but it was a good trip, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was my first time being away, and since lockdown, and the most expensive part of the trip was getting a COVID test. So that probably just explains where everything is at the moment. And then you go all that way to concede a 90th minute, um, 90th minute goal, to lose. So I must say the atmosphere when that goal went in was unbelievable. It's one of those grounds where when you're walking towards it, you're like, this is, you're kind of walking into a bit of history. Now, that being said, the atmosphere wasn't great up until the 27 minute when the walkout happened, or the alleged walkout. There wasn't a huge amount of it. But when that winner went in, it was just unbelievable. And
Yeah.
you can really, when they say it's a place like Goodison, when the fans get up, it's hard to play. And when that goal went in, that's as loud as a stadium I've heard in a good while anyway.
Yeah, it's like they were sulking for their bad run throughout the game and then it kind of wound them up a bit. But yeah, Everton have had one win in their last 9 games, and that was that game. So I saw a tweet there saying Mikel Arteta has literally blood on his hands for that second half performance and first half performance, to be fair. But yeah, cracking weekend of sport, Sean. I sat down and watched the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. It's on Channel 4, so it's great. Didn't have to stream, it was on the telly here. And Jesus, what drama altogether. I don't know if you caught much of it or...
Yeah, yeah, I did. Yeah, I suppose that even the way it's been brewing the last few weeks, you can visibly notice that Sky have put a lot of kind of money back into it to kind of promote it, and it being on main event the last couple of weekends. Now, I don't know many other sporting events that's main event over a Premier League game, even if it's a kind of a run of the mill game. But yeah, it's been brewing, I suppose, that with the Drive to Succeed documentary that's got a lot of people into Formula One.
Drive to Survive.
Or Drive to Survive, sorry. And obviously the F1 PlayStation game and things like that. And you still need to have a good product, if you like, on display. And when you've the person going for the eighth record-breaking 8 World Championship, or the kind of the young guy the young kid on the block going for the first. I mean, that makes a compelling view in either way. And then, to have it level going into the exact same points going into the final race, it was just it was set up really for a classic. And I think a lot of people like myself, I watched the Saudi Grand Prix a few weeks ago, but other than that, I hadn't watched any this year. And I think that's what it's all about. That's what those top sports events do, similar to the Ryder Cup in golf, or the Champions League final. It gets people in just for those big moments.
Yeah, and it was something else. Like it was set up for such drama at the start, and it was petering out to safety car. It was still compelling, the initial. I think it was a virtual safety car, but we'll obviously get to the talking point. We won't spend too long on this, as neither of us are F1 experts, but. Similar to yourself, I'll kind of be keeping an eye on the leaderboard. I wouldn't really, with Sundays being so many other sports on, I find it hard to sit down and watch other Grand Prix. So this was the first one I got to watch, start to finish, really. And yeah, that call at the end, like obviously the safety car rule in itself is unfair, because if you build like a 50-second lead, that's going to be cut down if there's a crash. Latifi crashing into the wall, and seemingly the perfect timing for Max Verstappen. Now they seem to have broken a small bit of their regulations, because all cars are meant to be lapped or unlap themselves, because they were basically five or six cars between Hamilton and Verstappen, and that didn't happen. They just let those 5 cars opposed to the cars behind Verstappen. But then under that regulation, it basically says that the race director can do what he wants in terms of safety cars, call as he sees it, essentially, to paraphrase it. So I don't know if Mercedes will, in whatever court, will ultimately have a claim, although, technically they broke the previous breach. I just think that one they have about the race director saves it, but he obviously wanted them to race. I think it's been unfair to say he wanted Max to win or anything like that, obviously, but he wanted to race. It's just whether it definitely had a bit of WWE feel, and I don't know how Netflix are going to top that actual real drama of the sport itself, but it was compelling viewing anyway, that last lap. Incredible.
Yeah, well, they made sure it didn't peter out to a kind of an empty finish. That's something like, I watched a bit more of Formula One back in the day when it was on BBC, and at home here we don't have the F1 channel, so I kind of haven't watched a lot of it. But that's always something that the safety car does provide, that hidden drama in it, and especially when you go to a track where maybe it's raining or you have a bad conditions, even like what you had in Saudi Arabia a couple of weeks ago, where it's just anything's going, really, anything's happened. There's collisions and there's all sorts going on. Yeah, it's a weird one. The whole rule. As soon as I heard, and watching it, even the commentators were watching it kind of blind. As soon as it happened, and then even the words he said, it's like we're a motor, it's a motor race. I just felt that was a bit kind of contrived, if you like. I mean, it's not the job of, I'd imagine, the stewards to make sure that there's entertainment for the viewer. I mean, ultimately it's the safety and making sure the regulations are being upheld. But that being said, I think there was an element of Formula One, I think, as a whole, probably looking at it going, we've had such a great year off the back of it. It can't peter out to nothing, and in providing that last lap finale, I mean, you actually couldn't write a better script, really, with everything where it is, and Verstappen pegging back Lewis Hamilton. It does feel like everyone's talking about Formula One. It's got their face on the back page. I think it will go quite a way before it's done through the court. I think Mercedes certainly would feel like they've got ground to stand on. But it did feel like, because obviously, like I said, I haven't watched the whole Formula One season, and everyone's saying Lewis deserved to win the race in Abu Dhabi. But a lot of people felt Verstappen probably the winner overall, and it does feel like almost that there is a little bit of injustice there with how it finished. And certainly when there's a loophole in the regulations, and it's happened in other sports in the past, and it never sits well with one side or the other. But it was great excitement, and I suppose that's ultimately what the casual viewer wants. I know a lot of people are fans of Hamilton or fans of Verstappen, and maybe you don't want that, but I think Formula One understand, I'd imagine, as a general marketing strategy, that they understand that there's a lot of casual fans with new fans with eyes on it, maybe don't know the regulations, as well as other fans, similar to maybe a sport like rugby or cricket, where there's a lot of different laws or rules where you might necessarily know 100% as a casual fan. And I just feel like with the race there, it did have a little bit of an edge, where you were sitting and you're kind of going, Jesus, is this happening?
Yeah. And the drama was built, the drama so well, as you can now listen to the live radios, and to hear Toto in the middle of the final lap going, "This isn't right, Mikey. This isn't right." It's just unbelievable television. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Like, he'd literally almost given up on Lewis. He turned away, and then Lewis went for it again, which was incredible. How he managed to get back at him with his worn tires. I think hindsight's probably ruling this a small bit, but with my uneducated eye, I think they maybe could have changed tires the first virtual safety car, Mercedes anyway, but they went for the safe route, and to be fair, it was working if Nicholas Latifi didn't crash into a wall, to be fair to them. So it is a bit mad how he can just change the whole race, but that's more the safety car rules. And again, it was more the lap, and it was more that they weren't going to unlap the cars until Christian Horner had his little mic on the radio, which is interesting. It's like hearing Jurgen Klopp as City are on a counter-attack giving out to the referee. It's absolutely bizarre. But look, it was great content on F1, and as I said, I'll be watching that more of it next year, and I don't think I'll be the only one, to be honest with you.
But that's what I'm saying. I presume, now I don't know for sure, but I'd imagine stocks in Formula One have gone up. I'd imagine sponsorships gone up. Businessmen and countries like we've seen in the past, like Bahrain having Grand Prix, more money's going to get pumped into the overall the overall championship. And I think whether you like it or not, that bit of controversy is never actually bad for the sport. It gets people talking about it, and the casual bar stoolers chatting about it as well. And I think that's what it's all about.
Katie Taylor, you stayed up to watch the fight?
Yeah. It was a weird one because I knew about the fight a couple of weeks ago because I saw it on her Instagram, and I knew she was in Liverpool, and obviously we were there last weekend. And I think I got to Thursday or Friday, and I saw the weigh-in, and I was, oh Jesus, I forgot Katie's fighting this weekend. And I think she must be the only sports person in Ireland where I genuinely think we just underappreciate. I think maybe it's she hasn't had feels like she's done everything already, and you almost know that Katie's probably going to win her fight. 20-0 in her professional career, all the success really, and winning the Olympics, obviously disappointment in Rio in 2016. But I can't think of any other sports star that we undersell and that we even in the media coverage. And now there's a lot of good work being done as well by journalists going over, but just as a whole really. And obviously there's a big taboo at the minute with boxing in Ireland. I think that's very clear. There's a whole grey area there, obviously with certain boxers and certain people involved in the sport, but that we're underselling probably our greatest ever athlete, certainly one of them. And to think that a lot of people probably wake up on Sunday morning, read the papers, or listening to the radio, and going, "Oh, Katie was fighting," whereas she should be box office, and it's a travesty really that she'll never get to have a homecoming big fight here in Dublin, because she would sell out any arena. She'd absolutely 100% sell out Croke Park. And it's an awful shame really, because she, like I said, I think she's one of our greatest ever sports people, and we just, you kind of forget, a lot of people who maybe aren't on social media, or they would have missed that Katie was fighting. And it doesn't help for Katie as well, in particular, now that Eddie Hearn, they've moved to the Zone, and they've gone away from Sky.
It's going to bring that up. Yeah, that's not a great, like you said, for the casual fan.
Yeah, and I think that's certainly something. I mean, she fought in Liverpool there on Saturday, and that's probably as close she'll ever get to a homecoming fight, for example. Now Michael Conlon and a few others have fought up in Belfast. Potentially a few years down the line, it could be an option for Katie Taylor. But like I said, I was watching that with a bit of resentment, really. That, like I said, we'll never get to see her in this country. And if she has that big fight in the spring in Madison Square Garden, it'll be I think we'll see a lot more coverage because of the caliber of the fight. But still, I mean, you can't help but feel that whatever happens in Katie's career, that there might just be that little bit of, not on her part, but that little bit of legacy with, if she had a big fight in Dublin, the whole country would stop, or she had a big fight in Ireland, the whole country would stop, and it'd be memorable. And in 30 years' time, you'll be remembering the night she fought such and such. And I think that's just so unfortunate for Katie. She's that good that she hasn't had a whole heap of competitive fights. Obviously, there was a couple of fights with Pursuit, but maybe that just goes against her. But it shouldn't, because she's one of the greatest female fighters of all time. And if it was any other sports star in any other, if we had the best, I suppose, rugby player in the world, the best ball player in the world, they'd be front page everything they did, and it's just a pity for Katie, because she really is. She's greatness.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of that, to be honest with you. Not much else to add. Only looking forward to the spring fight. She's 20-0. Like you said, hopefully there'll be a bit more coverage. But again, like, it's bad enough having it on Sky Sports box office, but when it's like change complete channel, which a lot of people haven't even heard of, to be honest with you, it's only a new and up and coming one, at least in the UK and Ireland. It kind of adds to that. But yeah, moving on, before we touch on we'll briefly mention the Heineken Champions Cup, but we're going to talk a little bit about the European Cross Country Championships. Sean, just to summarise it, there was like a crowd of about 7,000 there. Absolutely brilliant occasion, and Ireland definitely punched above their weight here. They took home the under-23 gold. There was team gold. Dara McElhenney got a individual silver, and then there was an under-20 team silver, which they only lost to by a point against Britain. So they're like beating and competing with the likes of Britain and France. It was phenomenal. There was some atmosphere there. We spoke maybe 2 months ago on the lack of coverage of Irish athletics, and I think at the time RT hadn't picked up European cross country championships. At least a couple of journalists had mentioned that, but it was picked up. RT had 6 hours of coverage there on Sunday. Obviously, there was a lot of sport going on, but it was great that they were there. It was great that the majority of the races were shown, and it was great that the Irish performed phenomenally. And something that was noticeable, there was a lot of people tweeting about it. It just seemed there was a brilliant coverage of it. It was noticeable that it didn't lead the RT news. The F1 did, followed by the rugby. You know, you've got a European cross-country championships in Dublin. That's got to be leading the RT news anyway, whatever the rest of the broadcasters, which is a little bit of a slight that I had just watching the news back there yesterday evening. But it was brilliant. Jakob Ingebrigtsen is the youngest sub-4 miler in history. He's the 1,500 meter Olympic champion. He also won gold at the European Cross Country Championships. I don't think we've had an athlete of that caliber competing on our doorstep. So it's important to point all that stuff out. But brilliant occasion. As I said, 7,000 people there, and it was broadcast on RT as well. Brilliant stuff.
Yeah, I was very impressed with him during the Olympics. I remember because I watched the 1,500 meter. He, there's a lot written and said about him, and I think for those athletes, I mean, it's always difficult for them after winning any medal in the Olympics, really, to kind of find your way through, albeit 3 years now to the next Olympic Games. I suppose we spoke about it, Dan, really, that a lot of people have got kind of into athletics and into running through lockdown. Obviously helps in an Olympic year as well. So like you said, to have the crowd they had out in Fingal for that was magnificent, and it's something that Ireland have always been pretty strong in the cross country down right through the year. So it's good to see the support, and obviously RT having the coverage as well.
Yeah, and we're actually going to link the Jerry Kiernan Foundation, which was founded by a couple of his friends and colleagues, and it's looking to support Irish athletes who are competing at the highest level. So it's a brilliant foundation. We'll link the socials and the website if anyone wants to donate to that. It'll be in the description. So I did want to just touch on very briefly, Sean, on the Heineken Champions Cup. 4 Irish provinces winning. There were a lot of COVID scares, various both like majority of the Munster teams, Southern South Africa and London Wasps were hit with late COVID cases, but it was great to see a lot of Munster Academy players getting their chance, which they ordinarily wouldn't get, because like if the new URC format, it's not clashing with internationals, which is great in some ways, but in the other way, we spoke about this maybe 3 or 4 months ago, it does deny players the opportunity to have those appearances. So I think I touched on this morning, but there was basically 2 or 3 players from Ennis on the bench, which is not a traditionally rugby stronghold. There's a lot of other positives. It was just brilliant to see those Munster players get the opportunity. Ulster beating Claremont, first win in 6 years, and then Connacht beating Stade, and Leinster beating Bath. And again, they're not all 4 of the teams, you could argue, that they played aren't as strong as they used to be, but they're 4 household Heineken Champions Cup names. Great to see the wins. And one final thing to say, Edinburgh also beat Saracens, which shows you, I think, the strength of the URC, I guess. To another point, maybe these French and English teams, for whatever reason, they just don't seem to, particularly in the group stages, they seem to not quite turn up with their best teams, really. But it was a good weekend for Irish provinces. It's very rare that we get all 4 wins, and it'd be great to see Connacht in particular, because seeing the IRFU and the women, what's going on with the women's game, and the FAI get a lot of stick, but didn't the IRFU want to disband in Connacht a few years ago? So I think that just shows you where they're at, really, as well. But yeah, good weekend all around for the Irish provinces.
Yeah, I think it's still mad what's going on with the URC teams that got trapped in South Africa. I think it's frightening. I think I was reading something about Cardiff Blues, and I think it's 3 or 4 weeks that they've been kind of quarantined and in isolation, and every couple of days there seem to be more cases. It's scary, really, what's gone on there. I know the Irish women's cricket team nearly got caught over in Zimbabwe. Luckily they got out, but I think their gear and their bags and stuff have been in Oman for 11 days, and there's no sign of it getting back. So there's a couple of other golfers who are nearly stranded in South Africa. So it's very quick that the world can change. And like I said, Munster obviously it presents an opportunity for some of their young guns, and obviously some of the experienced guys that were still out on the pitch with them. But that I mean, as a sports person, and there's been a lot said about sports people over the last 18 months of this pandemic, but but that must be a terrible time for them. You know, to be kind of away from their family, you know, in a foreign country for a large part of it, and obviously they're trying to get back, and you don't know how some of them are going to deal with it. So it's very difficult times for them. Obviously, it's a positive for Munster that they won, and that Wasps themselves had a couple of issues. So it's hard to read into too much of particularly Munster's performance with everything that's going on. But you know, it has been a very interesting time for those provinces, and in particular, obviously the big Stevens's Day games, Connacht and Ulster, and Leinster and Munster and Thomond. Be interesting to see what sort of teams both line out with for that, because that's obviously a big day in the rugby calendar.
Absolutely. Connacht, last thing on Connacht, Jack Carty played very well, and with Joey Carbery's injury, there's potential that he's the number 2 to Sexton, and as I said, Sexton's going to be very old at the World Cup, so there's definitely a role for a second out half, and there's no reason why Jack Carty can't be that. He was phenomenal there again. Suits the style of play that Connacht are playing at the moment. Premier League weekend, Sean. Most of the big games were Saturday, and they weren't great games in terms of there wasn't any standout fixture. A lot of penalties. That's the kind of talk now. I saw Max Rushton, former presenter Soccer AM, hosts a great podcast, Football Weekly, isn't it? That's his podcast. But he was saying he'd get rid of penalties altogether unless they're goal scoring opportunities. So we're all down this rabbit hole of penalties. I think we did touch on it in the summer, but there's been a lot more penalties with the era of VAR that referees are like, we have to get this right. And for example, the Madison penalty, like, I don't want to see that given as a penalty, but in the VAR era, I guess a lot more of them are being given, I for want of a better way of phrasing that. But yeah, your thoughts maybe on the Premier League as overall and that penalty issue, which is dominating this weekend's headlines.
Yeah, I think the penalty issue, I think that they have to look around it, because, you know, commentators as well to blame refs for saying there's contact. I mean, I think they need to go down the lines of looking at, I'm not sure how it would work, but isn't it an advantage for the player to go down? In certain cases it is. It's too easy for the ref to give a penalty. There was one where in the Arsenal Villa game earlier on the season where Lacazette gets kicked, but you know, it's more of an advantage for him to go down. Similar with the Rudiger one on the weekend. It's too easy for the players to give the referee a decision to make, because they invariably side with the penalty. And then you've got the game at Anfield, and you know, the 2 early Liverpool penalty decisions that they wanted, I didn't really think were penalties, and the referees kind of getting obliterated for it. Then the Salah one, I mean, it is a penalty, but Salah, again, he's very clever in what he does. It's similar enough to what Maddison does. He gets his body in the way, and obviously Mings is just all over the place. But then people want the Ings one to be a penalty, and if the Danny Ings one's a penalty, then the Robertson one's a penalty in the first half. So it's just, they'd end up with 15 or 16 penalties every week. And I just think with penalties in general, I think that they need to kind of look at it and go, isn't it an advantage for the player to go down, and does it suit them to go down? And because if you go down the way of is there contact, then you know, you could be given a penalty for anything. But I think that bit of common sense should be kind of tried to exercise a bit more. That there's too many times you're watching a game and it's kind of ruined by a penalty. It's too easy there for Maddison to win that penalty. And obviously you don't really blame him, because he's given the ref a decision to make. But like I said, that Rudiger one, and you know, that one where you've got your back to goal and the player kicks you from behind and like goes for the ball and the player goes down, and I think that's just too easy. And like I said, you see a lot of them throughout the season. Then the City Wolves one is just, it's a disgrace, really. I was watching that game live.
Shocking decision.
Yeah. And it's one of them, I've said it so often, I think the big mistake referees have in general is they give what they think they've seen, not what they have seen. So it looks very clear. Like, it does look like Ruben Neves, or sorry, Martinho's got his arm up in a bit of an unnatural position, and I'm sure John Moss takes one look at it and goes, "Why is his hand up there?" And gives the penalty. Where, as you know, he clearly hasn't seen the ball hit the top of his arm. And as soon as I saw it, I thought it was bonkers, really. And then it ruins too many games. And then the United one again, it is a penalty. Now it's one of those where Max Aarons is stupid. But when he does throw him to ground, but it's kind of almost too easy for Ronaldo in that sense to go down. But then you have that argument like the Mings one, then the defender's just naive and stupid. So as a defender with that one, you can't really have any complaints. But with the Neves one and the Maddison one, or sorry, with the Moutinho one and the Maddison one, you can have every complaint in the world, I think. But I just think I'd like to see that bit of common sense issued a lot. And I do agree, if a penalty, I don't like this one. If it's a foul, if it's a foul, it'll be a foul in the box. I'm not 100% on that one, because you could be given a foul for anything really. I think if you're given a penalty, it should be a real penalty, and too many this year have been. And across, you go European football, you go Champions League, there seems to be a penalty every week. And yeah, it's hard to know what would solve it, but I do think that if it's an advantage for the player to look for the penalty, then I wouldn't be given one myself.
Yeah, it distorts the stats a small bit. Like, wasn't it Vardy against City last year got 2 penalties? There's just a lot more penalties now. I don't know what the solution to it is. Obviously, you got to count penalties as goals, but when you're comparing ears, then like there's, I don't know the stats in it, but it is the VAR. VAR is the issue there in terms of being given and penalties and all that jazz.
Yeah, because that's the issue, because the threshold has gone down, because you can slow the camera down to an inch and it shows a touch. I mean, it doesn't matter if you touch him; it's not always a foul. It's like the David Luiz one last year against Wolves. That one where your man kicks him in the knee. Oh, there's contact, but contact doesn't necessarily mean a foul. And I think that's certainly where it should come, because even if you think of, there's been some Ireland games in the last couple of years where you see something, well, that's a penalty, because it's a penalty in the Premier League, but it's just different everywhere you go, really.
And the West Ham penalty shout, right? And I'm not saying it's not a foul, it probably is, but I didn't think it was clear and obvious, because he's kind of like almost trying to kick him in some ways. And it just goes back to your point there. If there's contact, like if anything, forwards are fouling defenders a lot. If you just think about this for a second, like hit a ball by a defender and then purposely kick a defender, well, surely by definition that's a free out.
Well, the Dawson one, I wouldn't give a penalty, because he's looking for, that he's got a clear advantage of going down and giving it the decision to make. And you can't blame Dawson, because everyone in the different leagues around the world, and you see in any league really, you go out and you try and gain an advantage. But that's one where he's looking for, and it's too easy for him to go down, because there's no consequence for him if he does go down. And it's hard to know, but I do think that one. But that's the problem though, because Moyes will look at it and go, well, look, the Rudiger got a penalty for a similar one, kick in the back of the leg. But that's just a consistency. But that's refs for you. I mean, some of those refs, they honestly just go out, I think, to rip the piss. And John Moss is someone that was up there. I mean, he sent Xhaka off a couple of times. There's that famous video of him at Anfield against Tottenham, kind of saying, "Effort, I'll give the penalty." And some of those boys have been around too long in the tooth.
Yeah, Mike Dean in particular brings it on nicely to Everton Arsenal and the game itself. Mike Dean was we had the honour of watching Mike Dean there, but it was, for those who've never done the away end before for the various Premier League clubs that we support, even though we should all be supporting Irish clubs, but here we are, we're just in love with the Barclays, I think is the best way of putting it, Sean. It was great, wasn't it? And it was really proper atmosphere, and it was proper ground to go to away from home. And for a while we were just gonna get our way to a scumbag 1-0 win. It was amazing, and but it just all fell apart, obviously. But yeah, Mike Dean was actually overall probably had a good game, to be fair to him. But a couple of small, very close VAR calls, which again, it's not great for people on the ground that don't see it until they show the still image of Richarlison basically onside for the second goal, which led Goodison to erupt.
Yeah, it's I think you always find the away fans are the ones that are the kind of the old school or the proper. I mean, there was a look of a lot of Arsenal fans in the away end that you knew had 40, 50 years experiences of going to different grounds around England and around Europe. I think when Arsenal scored, that's my first time being in a stadium with VAR where my mood, like when the second goal gets disallowed, I mean, I celebrated that as much as a goal. I mean, it's the weirdest feeling ever. Like you lose the run, you honestly think it's a goal. It's like you've scored an extra goal. Um, so I can imagine where if you're going every week and you go home then on the telly and then you look at it and you go, that wasn't off. That's a toenail. That it could get frustrating, but yeah, it was a great atmosphere. Goodison is, I, having been there, I definitely put it on. If you're like a ground hopper or you frequently go to enjoy atmospheres, I think you've got to get to Goodison under lights because there was something special about it, I do think. And obviously Everton are moving to Bramley Dock, and they're going to get a brand new kind of state of the art stadium. This kind of new one of those kind of municipal stadiums, with all the bells and whistles. But you do get the sense from Everton fans that they don't want to leave Goodison because it's just it's an incredible, that noise when, like I said, when that goal goes in, it goes over your head really. It's an amazing stadium, I think, and obviously to see a ground like that go, and obviously we have a couple of things happening in Dublin in particular with Dalymount and Talca Park. And what I would say is, having been to Dalymount, it's similar where you do feel the history, and obviously Dalymount's very run down, but you go down that laneway towards the Jody stand in Dalymount, and you feel the history going down through the houses. And it's similar with Goodison, where when you're there, you do feel like you are witnessing history, and you are part of something, like you are part of a historic stadium. And I'd have that similar to Dalymount with Goodison.
Yeah, like all good things, I guess, like the Upton Park example and the Highbury example and the White Hart Lane or the 3-point lane example for Spurs, that it's all about eventually you do have to upgrade your stadium. And it was not Goodison's not in bits, but it's a very old stadium, and I don't think any away end's ever going to be appetizing. But it was what I was expecting, to be fair. But yeah, the noise from zero to nothing, from nothing to that noise and that swirling noise, it was like it reminded me of Croke Park, only there was like half the people there, and it was just because it's like literally half the size of Croke Park. Goodison probably is. It just swirled with the noise, and it was absolutely incredible. It was a pleasure to be there and watch Murray Gray hit a screamer, and as I said, Everton's first win in 9 games, which is absolutely disgraceful. And I was kind of planning a bit of an Arsenal rant if we did lose to Southampton, but obviously we got the 3 points, and on that Arsenal game, very briefly, Sean, on Mikel Arteta, it's so annoying under him. It just seems like swing from so frustrated with him to, okay, I can get behind this team. And it's just the team that does this. It's not necessarily my fault, and that's not that I'm up and down or anything. It's just they caused this by dreadful 90 minutes against Everton, a dreadful first 20 minutes against Southampton, and then that following 70 minutes after we managed to play one of those passes and finally get out and score a goal like Arteta wants, it seems to me now that I can get behind the team again. But those performances against United and Everton were a disgrace.
Well, I just on that Southampton game, I think it's becoming a lot more of a common theme amongst teams maybe playing against a team that are parking the bus, or what they call like a low block now, that if you don't score early, you find it increasingly difficult to break teams down. Look at Wolves against Liverpool a couple of weeks ago, obviously City against Wolves recently. And it's just something I've noticed, and you even hear managers saying it a lot more, that you've got to score early. And once you score early, it feels like they have to come out and play a bit more, and then there's a little bit more gaps. And particularly if you're playing at home to a side, or away from home, and you get a goal early, they have to come out a bit more. And I think that's just something to keep an eye out a lot more. If you're a Man United or a Man City, or one of the big teams trying to beat a Burnley or a Newcastle or Southampton at the moment, if you get a goal early, that really kicks on. And it's something that Man City have been really good at for the last 2 or 3 years, how often they score within the first 10 minutes. They did it to Watford a few weeks ago. They've been really, really good at it, and it's just something to keep an eye on with them. In general with Arsenal, I think I think Arteta has, I'd say he has 8 players that he trusts week in, week out. Maybe a little bit more, but the problem is Smith Rowe missed the Everton game, Saka missed the United game, and Arsenal probably can't afford to have one of them missing or one player similar to that, because there's the drop off to what Arteta wants, I think, is drastic. Obviously, you've all the stuff with Aubameyang. Like, I've come to think of it, I don't know a position in football that has had more turbulence since 2006 than the Arsenal captaincy. It's just, it was Gallas, then he threw a rant at Birmingham, then it was Fabregas, he left for Barca, then it was Van Persie, he left for United. Then it was a Koscielny then, and then he left for Bordeaux, and then released that he was going to Bordeaux before he told Arsenal, and then now we've got Aubameyang and
well, Granit Xhaka.
Granit Xhaka, sorry, God, I forgot about Granit.
Well,
Xhaka.
sorry, the best bit about that is Emre did the vote. The players voted.
Yeah.
And the fans
Emre had 5 captains, and I mean, I think if you get rid of Aubameyang now, what's going to happen? If it did happen, I think it would go from Aubameyang to Lacazette. Lacazette's going to go in the summer, and then you'll have more merry-go-round. So it's just bizarre. Well, I don't think of anything else. You look at Liverpool's captaincy; they haven't changed their captain since 2002, I think. Henderson and Gerrard. Or 2003, I think Gerrard at 22 was given the captaincy, something like that. United, albeit Maguire, they had Maguire. Then Evra was there, Rooney. Obviously, you'd experienced players, but God, what's happened with the Arsenal armband? And then when you think of the 2 years, you think of the 2 before that. So obviously, Tony Adams, he was captain from Vieira. But Tony Adams, I think, was captain for 10 or 11 years. And it's just where it's gone.
Well, in my opinion, if you looked at it without knowing anything, you'd probably give the armband to Xhaka. Now you can't give the armband to Xhaka at all. So I think the 2 players I came up with myself is Kieran Tierney, very injury prone, or as a fan in front of me was saying when I think you might have missed this during the Everton game or before the Everton game, he was pointing to Ramsdale to a mate of his, and he was saying he'd give the armband to Ramsdale tomorrow, which is what Connor Swords has commented there. I'm actually not against that, because we're at a stage now. We got to give the captaincy to someone that the whole fan base can get behind, all the players can get behind, and who's actually playing well and is going to play week in, week out. And I understand goalkeepers don't usually be captains, but this guy's 23. This guy, he's going right to the top. Aaron Ramsdale. There's just no doubt in my mind. He's going right to the top, and he's going to do it at Arsenal. Thank God. I don't think a bigger club will come in for him. Please God. Give him the captaincy. I'm actually all for that now, to be honest with you. And the away fans, they know better than me. So,
yeah, I think with like goalkeepers don't often get it. I get that. But goalkeepers can often change a team, and people have said it with Alisson and when De Gea took time. Obviously, when he was struggling, but when he settled into United, he changed United. They look really good. Obviously, they went on. And you think of some of his iconic performances over the years, like what Ramsdale's done at Arsenal is ridiculous. Because Arsenal still are poor defensively. We still concede an awful lot of shots. But it's not just that. It's just his mannerism. I think Arteta has managed him very well. It has to be said. I mean, he kind of, it felt like the West Brom game straight away put him in, and he only signed a couple of days. And I think that was big for him because the Arsenal fans were already singing his name. Arsenal had a really poor start to the season. They went and won 5-0, I think, at West Brom. And he's kind of been given a go ever since the Leno at Man City. And if you're Ramsdale, like what I think Arsenal have missed is players who've been at the club for, like, I'm looking at Tomiyasu and I'm looking at Ramsdale just going, Ben White, Gabriel, and Tierney, give me the next 4 or 5 years at Arsenal. Let's try and build something off it. And United have always been a great club at that, where they've had players who've been there a long, long time, and there's that continuity. And Arsenal's haven't had many long-serving players, senior players. And that's something that I think is important. Like Arsenal and Wenger put a lot of time into the British core with back in 2013 or 14. Like Chamberlain's playing with Liverpool, Ramsey's at Juve, Jack Wilshere's training with Arsenal, Kieran Gibbs is with Inter Miami, Carl Jenkinson's still at Nottingham Forest. I think I might be missing one. So that's what I mean. It's just it hasn't worked at Arsenal, that succession planning. And to be honest, I think Unai Emery doesn't get enough blame for what he did at Arsenal. I mean, he broke up the nucleus of a decent side at the end of Wenger. I mean, they got to the Europa League. They got to the Europa League semi-final. Aubameyang was really firing, and he got rid of Ramsey, Wilshere, brought in a lot of bluffers as I call them, and they bottled top four.
Nicolas Pepe.
Yeah, they bottled top four, and you think if you get top four, like the longer you go without top Champions League football, the harder it is to get back into it. But when you're given two opportunities, two bites of the cherry, and in his first full season, you don't take it. And like I said, he broke up a lot of that dressing room. He tried to control it with his 5 captains, and it clearly didn't work. And it was a massive mistake by Arsenal, and it set Arsenal back years, really. And that's all the stuff that Arteta's trying to build again. But just on Aubameyang, the one thing, like a lot of people have likened it to the Ozil situation. I think it's different because Ozil still had a lot of fans within Arsenal, within the Emirates in particular. I mean, when he was playing, he went to take a corner. The fans wanted to see him. The fans wanted him to play. With Aubameyang, I think it's completely turned the other way. I think fans are just considering where Arsenal are, probably considering the current pandemic state, to go away and not have your test or miss a couple of days. I think in the position Arsenal are in the league, I think he's damaged goods, and he won't have that. Even I noticed from the game at Goodison, he just doesn't. When he came on, you don't really get the sense that he's your captain, and people are roaring him on. So it's just bizarre.
And he was the only player singled out for, I wouldn't even call it abuse. I was almost disappointed the Arsenal fans were more frustrated, but he was the only one that was getting a bit of stick at the end of that game. So, and that was before all this broke up. But
and the thing with Aubameyang is, if you're looking at it, and if you're an Arsenal fan now and you're seeing, say, that back 5, if Ben White has a bad game, or Gabriel or Tierney or whoever, you go, fair enough, they can have one, but at least you can get behind them. With Aubameyang's age and his attitude and not scoring goals and a few of the chances, you can't really get behind him anymore. And I think that's where he'll lose on that goodwill. And obviously, he's like, it has to be said, he's like everyone, I suppose. He's had a difficult pandemic, obviously, issues. He's had COVID, malaria. He's had family issues. He struggled for form, But that being said, where he was when Arsenal won the FA Cup to where he is now, I mean, it's a shadow, really. It really is a shadow of the player he was.
And it's important to point out those personal issues, but also point out that there's hundreds of players in the Premier League who've got family all over the world. I think Alisson spoke about it before, how difficult it's been. So it's been difficult for loads of players. So it's just the way he kind of acts sometimes. And as someone pointed out on Twitter to me anyway about, Klopp didn't go near him when he went to Liverpool. Do you know what I mean? He probably had the opportunity to sign Aubameyang. He didn't go near him, and I did, like, there was a good player in there. We made a mistake giving him the big contract at the time. I don't think we, as a fan base, would have put up with him, Aubameyang, not getting the contract. But it was just the same thing. You see it in every sport. You see it with Irish rugby managers, Irish rugby coaches. They get the new contracts and mess up with the World Cup. Eddie O'Sullivan, 2007, for example. Mesut Ozil gets a new contract, messed up. Theo Walcott gets a new contract. Theo Walcott was one of the strikers.
Yeah. David De Gea is another example when he was, he's on 400 grand a week.
Yeah, and he's playing well now, to be fair, but he's conceding a lot of goals.
But De Gea's had huge dips.
Yeah, I mean, and I know De Gea's playing very well, and I don't want to go on about this point, but I would try and get Dean Henderson back in the team and just build your club around him, because I do think there's a good goalkeeper in there. And I like De Gea's had a great season in terms of the amount of saves he's making. There are a lot of goals being conceded there, and that's not all down to him. But I don't know. Interesting on the goalkeeper front that Kasper's having a brutal year, to be fair. Yeah. So pointing out.
Like, I've never been a big Kasper Schmeichel fan. Like, obviously he's been a good keeper, and like he made a couple of brilliant saves in that FA Cup final. But Leicester are such a Brendan Rodgers team. Like, I watched them against Newcastle, and for half an hour James Maddison was unplayable. absolutely unplayable, and delighted because I captained him on fancy. I took a big risk, but I got through safely through my cup game. But he's one of those players you watch sometimes you're like, how is he not starting for England? And then, I watched him in the Arsenal game earlier on the season, and he was appalling. And they're such a Brendan Rodgers team at the minute. Like, they can't do anything in Europe. Like, Rodgers has really struggled in Europe throughout his Liverpool time, Celtic. Considering where Celtic were and their success on domestic level, and then you compare that with Martin O'Neill's success in Europe and even Neil Lennon's success in Europe in the Champions League.
To Andrew's at least scoring, his teams are scoring goals in Europe, and in the Conference League now. But
if you look at where Rodgers had real struggles, and even when Lennon came in, the second time I think they beat Lazio away, and just small things like that with Rodgers, but they just look, every time they go forward, they just look like they're going to concede. And Johnny Evans came off injured there against Newcastle, and indeed he went back into the back four. That might be something that works. But yeah, it's just classic Brendan Rodgers at the minute. That being said, like, Brendan Rodgers teams, when they play good, when they play well and they click, they're incredible. They're everything you want in a kind of a football team. And in particular Maddison. And your man Daka, like, we've been saying for a while, they need to replace Jamie Vardy, but Daka looks like a ready-made replacement.
Yeah, good title race coming up with the 3 teams in there, and there's a 4th place to be put up. Did hear a really interesting case for Spurs to win the league or to compete for the league, and just wouldn't rule that out with the games in hand and Conte, and he's got a few weeks. Moving on to GA referees, and just I wanted to put this final thing in the talking point. Look, I'll be honest, Sean, like, there's so much sport on this weekend. Like, I saw the clips, so I saw the mark and I saw the shoulder. Now, I'd heard about the shoulder before I saw it, and what I was expecting was a shoulder to shoulder and a red card to be given. Now, it was a frontal charge off the ball. Not for a second saying that's a red card, but it's a yellow card for rough play would be my decision. Now, obviously, the opponent's hurl, not Noel McGrath's hurl, but the other hurl, there was confusion. Obviously, the linesman gave what you were saying at the top of the show, what he thought he saw, or the referee or whoever gave that decision. All right, it's a wrong call. I just don't like all this singling out and these. I see these tweets, right? I saw a tweet, I've forgotten it, former Kilkenny hurler, whoever it was, 550 likes, 12 retweets, no replies or 2 replies, calling referees out for personal attacks. And I'm not going to lose any sleep over. Like, I don't want to be down this rabbit hole of trying to defend the indefensible of wrong decisions. I'm defending referees as in they're not going out there. No referee I've come across. Now, I've come across some awful referees, but they're not like these people. Like, they just assume they're looking for the limelight and all. I don't see that in 99% of referees, and I don't know enough about this individual referee to make a comment on it. But some of the vitriol and the people that tweet this and get their likes, and I'll name them all, the likes of Buff Egan and, to lesser extent, the likes of Michael Diagan and stuff, people who should know better, calling out referees. They get their likes, they feel a lot better about themselves, right? That's one part of it. The second part of it, which is completely unacceptable, is the surrounding of referees and the 5 or 6 brave lads that decide to blame their defeat in a big, I don't know what game it was, to be honest with you, a big game, and decide to surround.
Yeah, Senior Football Championship, and it was the semi-final.
These big lads that think that they're above everything, like, there's not 6 lads surrounding any of the corner forwards that didn't kick enough scores to win the game, or the 6 defenders that didn't do enough to win the game, or the goalkeepers kickouts that weren't good. It's just this macho-ness in the GA, and the reason they do it is because they know, well, obviously they're frustrated at the result. I'm not saying they're having a wider think about it, but they know that nothing's going to be done. There won't be any lifetime bans handed out. There won't be any. It was disgusting scenes, to be honest with you. I don't care what happens to you. You do not act like that to a referee. You don't act like that to anybody. You don't act like that to another human being. You kind of move on. It's a game at the end of the day. And again, it's not like, this wasn't, my thoughts here aren't replicated on what I'm seeing on social media. And I purposely stayed out of it because I didn't see enough of the games, to be honest with you. The mark call, it was a wrong call. I watched a video of it. I'm guessing he just thought the ball bounced because it was caught real low. That's the only thing I can think of. It made a wrong call, right? Jesus Christ. It happens, and I understand people are frustrated. I understand people put a lot of effort into county finals, winning provincial finals. I can only imagine what a senior footballer and the dedication they put in, but you can't act like that. It's scumbags. They're absolute scumbags for doing it, and they should be called out for that, and they should be given, like, I would throw the absolute book at the club. But it's a culture within. I heard Ger Gilroy, who I don't often agree with on off the ball, but he made some great points. He said it's the culture within a club that allows that to happen. Yeah. He made the point, how many of the management team, how many people within the club, the stalwarts of the club that aren't involved in the team, how many of them called out their players after that performance? I say none of them. I say they all talked in the pub about the referee for duration, which I've no problem with, as long as you haven't surrounded them on the pitch during the game. So I was very frustrated with the scenes, and I haven't got involved with it because I wasn't watching the game, so I only saw a couple of clips. But those full-time scenes are disgraceful. They have no time in any sport, let alone at GA, which we pride ourselves as GA men when we see the soccer scenes and we see, we're above that. We're not. Like the Wicklow club scenes we're disgrace. As a referee myself, I've had 99.9% really good games, to be honest with you. I think people are great, and the underage structures are great. The work that WGA do with underage teams is really, really good in terms of respect for referees, and it's improving immensely. But you still get dickheads, and the dickheads aren't being dealt with, and it's creeping back into the game. And one thing people don't mention a lot is the pandemic, and I just think people have a lot more built up anger these days. Yeah. I notice it with a few people I interact with, that they just seem to have a little bit more built up anger, and they take it out on referees because they're above referees. But I guarantee you, every single player that's surrounded that referee at the end of the game hasn't refereed before, and they don't know what it's like. And I just think I was just so frustrated watching those scenes going, well, we pride ourselves on, give respect, get respect, and the referee makes a mistake and he's lambasted. But look, it's I don't know what your thoughts on that was, but that's my little rant over anyway.
The weird thing will be when any punishment does come, because it's a Connacht Championship game, does it come from Galway County Board because they're representing Galway and Connacht? Does it come from the Connacht Central Council? Does it come from Crow Park? What I would say on that was, when I saw it first, I think Tommy Rooney put up on Twitter, I saw the video and it didn't really register. I just kind of seen it on my news feed. I didn't really watch it, just so I was like, damning scenes. And then I saw a load of tweets about it, and I looked at the video and I went, Jesus, like what? How has this been allowed to happen? And every time you watch it, you pick out someone different or something different happen. And a number of times in it, it looks like people are going up to kind of help the ref, and it just gets worse and worse. And more people are in his face, pushing and shoving him. Then there's someone goes up at the very end for another dose. It's something where I agree. A lot of people were very quick to condone the scenes at Irish Town House, which with Bows fans and Pats fans. Now there's a lot of stuff that hasn't come out about it. A lot of people think it's people from outside of Ireland coming over to cause trouble. There's all sorts of
Wales or Wrexham or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, but I mean that hasn't played out, or that hasn't been confirmed or anything. But it was horrendous scenes. And then even it's just like when you see that, I mean, it is indefensible. You can't defend that. You can't understand it. I get having a problem with a referee's decision. I think that's perfectly fine. I think most refs understand that. Most refs will have experience. They'll deal with it. But I think that the one by one getting up in his face, grilling him, the pushing, like the invasion of personal space there. And I agree with you on that. I think, and you've seen it, and even judging from a few things I've heard and spoken to, even in Dublin, you see it. Like there is a lot of that kind of machoism back in the GA. And you speak to people, and you speak to family members that have played Gaelic football in Dublin, and back in the 80s and 90s there was a huge problems with the culture, and that culture is probably creeping back into the GA and into seeing in Dublin club football. But that, and then the tweet, I agree with you, the tweets. I mean, when I saw a few of them, like the last line was kind of, well, obviously you can't excuse that behavior, but the previous 100 characters was kind of almost giving an excuse for the scenes at the end. And then with obviously this is one of the problems I have with the mark and the foot block and the square ball, like because the GA changed the ruling on it so often, that maybe there's a chance that the referee mightn't fully know it in the heat of the moment. Players don't know it. There's a square ball in a game we were at recently, and players were giving out to each other, but they didn't know the rule on it. They, foot blocks, no one knows the 100% rule. So that's a huge problem that the GA have had for a number of years. When you keep changing the rules and you keep nitpicking and you spend your whole Congress worrying about that, different rules, and some rules are only in the inter-county game and some rules are in the club game. But that being said, the abuse, I mean, it happens everywhere. It happens in Croke Park. I think in Croke Park it's maybe different because as a ref you probably don't hear that. It's white noise, but when you see scenes like that, I mean, it's a terrible look. And I know Irish football, and I've seen it with local clubs in Dublin, that they did a Respect the Ref campaign there. I think about a month ago, it was mentioned at the Aviva during one of the Ireland internationals. And I think something like that, considering the abuse players or referees were getting from players and parents, I think something similar needs to be done at a big day in Croke Park, because those scenes need to be condemned and the club punished. I think you're right there, because whatever happens, you can't touch the referee, you can't invade his personal space. And what the worst thing was, there were subs coming on, one by one. Most players had a go at him. Someone, I think, pushed him from behind. It was just a terrible look. And that's something where the GA, I'm sure, having seen what they've done over a few different issues over the last 2 to 3 years, I think there'll be no doubt that the GA will be pushing at the Connacht Council and the Galway Council to make a big statement about it. Because you remember when Blackrock in Cork won the hurling championship last year during COVID, the GA came out and they were very quick to say, look, you shouldn't be having celebrations in a pandemic. There's been obviously the issues with Dublin training and other counties training, and whatever's a bad look for the GA were very quick, considering how their role and the Irish government's role and what their role in our society is, and the funding or whatever. I think and I hope that they'll come out.
I'd be more hopeful. Yeah, I don't know. I'd be very skeptical, to be fair. They should be trying out next year's county championship, without a doubt. In fact, and those individuals should be given whatever bans necessary. But I just don't think there's that appetite in the GA. I think it's the more they talk about it, the more they bring it up, the more it's there. But I agree with you. And just the last thing, like Tommy, even the original tweet, Tommy really, to be honest, he comes across as a lovely fella. Just the tweet seemed like, I'm going to generate a bit of clicks here. If I was going about trying to generate a few clicks on that, that's the way I would have worded that tweet. But if I wanted to actually call out behavior, I would have just mentioned that instead of who gives a shit about what the foul was. The behavior is unacceptable and it's actually irrelevant, really.
Yeah, I think now my issue wasn't really with that tweet. I think it was some of the other tweets.
I know that. Yeah, but that I'm just going back to the original one. But yeah, I know what you mean. The likes of. Michael Dygan's tweet was probably what you're.
Well, I didn't see that, but I saw a few Facebook comments and different things, but it does feel like there's a definitely a wrong culture there, and that's how you address it.
It's not being called out enough.
Yeah, and I think there'll be people there, and I'm not sure. Like, I don't know the kind of the skeptics or the what's happened historically in the past. I think maybe there definitely be some people that think it would be too harsh to throw the whole club out at next year's championship. There'll be others that will say it.
I just completely disagree. I know you're not saying that, but I just completely they have to be thrown out. It's that point I made earlier. It's a culture within the club that allowed that to happen, and it hasn't been called out and dealt with. Because otherwise that wouldn't have happened in the heat of the moment. Like, we've all been on the receiving end of bad referee calls, right? And it happens, and you can F and blind. There's a difference between effing and blinding the ref as you're walking away from him and squaring up to him. I think that's a conscious decision. And I think that's when you start excusing that behaviour. It's when you're in massive trouble, not just as individual counties, but as a sport as a whole and as a country. I go back to this pandemic thing, and I think it's definitely building up a lot of anger, and it needs to be dealt with, because otherwise it's only going one direction. It's just getting worse and worse. And if this behaviour is allowed to happen, these macho men and these great lads that they would find ways to keep that behavior going, and worse, and until something seriously happens, it won't be properly dealt with, which is why.
And I think the word I was trying to say there is precedent. I think the precedent that comes out of this, and That's what I mean. Just on whatever happens, I don't think there's a real precedent of an issue like this that's happened in the last couple of years that I know of, particularly at a senior championship
Not since the
interprovincial.
Louth 2009.
Yeah.
I think.
So it's
But
something to watch.
But it's not like, because it hasn't happened in so long. It's not. I mean, we both agree on this. It hasn't just been like a random incident. It's kind of been brewing in a lot of different counties and through different things that have occurred. Championships are involved and stuff.
There's definitely that. There's different opinions because it's a GA game and it's not a rugby game or a football game or, go for a bit of cricket game or something like that. Because the GA, there does seem to be different opinion on it. But obviously, look, you could be here all night.
Absolutely. At Tackling Sport social media, do keep up to date, and we'll try and clip out a few of these clips, particularly this one if I can, on YouTube. But do please subscribe to our YouTube channel if you are listening to us in free. We'll be back next Monday. We'll do a special awards show given the RT Sports Personality of the Year. How Paul Donovan's not nominated is beyond me, but we'll do a separate award show to that, and we might get a few guests on as well. So that's going to be in the pipeline. It'll be next Monday, and then we'll be off for Christmas. Hooray! And we'll be back then in January. So my thanks to Sean.
I just mentioned the darts is back. Let's end on a positive. The darts is back.
Go on, sorry. And you have a tip. You have a tip that I'll get to in a sec. Go on, you give the tip.
Yeah, well, it's been an incredible last month and a half really of darts. There's been a couple of brilliant nights, and it's brewing. There's a lot of brilliant storylines. I think most casual darts fans will look at the price and maybe see Michael Van Gerwen, I think, is 9-2, but then you look at his form and even last year what happened to him. But that being said, well, hopefully I don't know about Boris, but will he keep the darts going, because obviously it was hugely hit last year. But I think if the crowd are back in the alley pally, I think hopefully that will spare on Michael Van Gerwen, because I think we need a bit of him back, because he's not he's not the world number one anymore, and hasn't been since this time last year really. And there's some great storylines. Obviously, Barney's back, having retired in 2019, and he's back again for more. He must. I have no idea what's going on really with Barney. It's hard to know. Peter Wright's playing some brilliant darts. Fallon Sherrick, obviously, is grabbing a lot of headlines and could potentially have her place in the Premier League next year. I think it would be brilliant for darts, because she's really shown that she wasn't like a one-trick pony. She's really, in the last month in particular, had a couple of really good ranking events performances as well. So there's a lot to like about the dart, because the dart last year was just showed it's not the same without the fans. And in particular with darts, you're drawn to the atmosphere, the colour, the whole emotion of it. And I think darts is like, there's been a couple of sports, most namely golf, Formula One, that's really benefited from the pandemic. They've found a way out of it. They've grown their kind of base. Their sports, I think, looking at cricket's really struggled during it. This is at a professional level. Darts has really, really kind of struggled, and it's slowly starting to get back, but it does feel like there's a few hurdles to go to having a full capacity, making sure there's a full capacity on the 3rd of January for the World Championship final.
Absolutely, yeah. Your tip, you gave it to me today. If you want to share.
Well, I like Ryan Searle. I think he got to the final there of the players. I think it was a few weeks ago. But and it was said last year, and Gary Anderson practiced with him every day of the week, and Gary Anderson is very complimentary of him. Peter Wright was very complimentary when he beat him in that final, and everyone that you hear talked about Ryan Searle, it's like, how has this guy not done it before? And all 4 quarters are interesting, because darts is quite competitive now. Your likes of Dimitri van den Berg and Johnny Clayton and guys like this, where you're playing a 5th or an 8th ranking player, and you're up against a high quality player. It's not like a few years ago where it was the kind of the big three, if you like, of MVG, Anderson and Taylor. So I like Ryan Searle. Yeah, I think I'd love to see him do well, and Tackling Sport are going to be on the Ryan Searle fan club.
There we are, 40-1, lads. Best price. I told Emmett Deeney that tip earlier, and he said, a little bit short for me, Chief, and a good rule of thumb is don't back blind dart players. Ryan Searle obviously has to wear glasses when he's driving. So, any
you
particular
go.
thoughts on that? There you are. So
He doesn't wear them on the
just, yeah, well, he prefers the darts players you can see. But look, I can see grand and I can't play darts, so I'll roll in behind Ryan Searle. Sean, thanks very much.
Cheers, Dan.
Cool, we'll get going. We've been on way too long. We'll be back next Monday night. Thanks so much for listening. And we'll be out in podcast form later on this evening for those watching the live stream.